This is a discussion on the miniseries Anatomy of a Scandal, and it's kind of a strange thing for me to do because my channel is sort of raw video logs about my mental health, so this feels a bit more like content creation, but I want it to be sort of therapeutic and so it's just to be more of a discussion, just a casual discussion about movies and TV series that I want to sort of engage in and talk about. Perhaps discussion's a good word instead of a review. I'm just going to see how it goes. So this is like the first one I'm doing, and as I've said in a previous video that I'll upload before this, it's another video log that it's more just like a therapeutic outlet for me to sort of just get some sort of mental stimulation and some productivity in my day. I thought it could be a good thing for me just to actively sort of seek out things that I want to watch and talk about them as well, and maybe it'll just help me in some way. This is the first one, and actually had handwritten notes for this as well. No chance of reading that on your side, but no chance on my side. I don't know if I can even read this, but and I've only written notes for the first 3 episodes. I kind of gave up after that, more so just for my energy and my in me not sure if I'm going to be doing this or not, so I kind of lost the energy to do a lot of it, but maybe it'd be nice to, I've got the recap open here because my memory is getting worse by the day. It's to be kind to myself, so I've got that here set up so I can kind of just have a little scan read of stuff if I need to. Let's just dive into it. So first of all, it's a show that I wouldn't normally watch, because I think I watched a trailer for it, and it just felt like it was quite a drama-ish. Like, I do like dramas, but it just felt like it was that kind of sharp dramas of someone being sort of ruined in court, and there's that harshness to it as well, so that originally kind of put me off watching it because I'm a lot more selective of what I'm watching at the moment with my mental health. So it took a while to just suddenly just press play. I'm going to read through some of these notes and see what comes up in the discussion. And this is going to try and keep this like just raw, kind of similar to my video logs about my health, just so it's definitely not like a professional review. It's just a casual discussion, more so just for me, really, just to keep me going day to day. So I've got the first note here. I've written down, this is episode 1, that difficult to watch a world and a system that's so disconnected with reality and their own sort of true nature. So it's kind of like a spiritual reference in that, where in that politics and the world of politics just feels like it's almost a bunch of sort of children arguing, and there's like prestige and money and power, and it's just it feels like the humanity or caring about people or trying to help, if it can feel like there's not many individuals, I'm sure there is here and there, but majority just feels like it's not there. It's just, and it's a symptom of that sort of system that's set up, where it probably doesn't, in order to survive in that, it requires those qualities that are opposite to what I just mentioned. So it kind of feels like as long as that system's in place, it's going to produce the same ingredients of people and qualities, and what comes out in regards to bills and law and help. It's going to be a product of all of that stuff, really. So that was a bit difficult for me to watch. I don't tend to watch the news, for that same reason. It's just very triggering, everything that's going on, and especially politics. It just feels like a completely just a really disconnected world, of just in that sort of power game, really. I've got here, when affair was revealed, Sophie didn't seem as affected. It was like he did something so much more insignificant, and I've got here that perhaps that shows the state of their marriage. So if I can remember right, it didn't feel like it was a huge reaction from Sophie, and perhaps part of that was shock, but I just sensed it just showed, it wasn't so much that he betrayed her. It just felt like, with her being in this sort of marriage and to a powerful political figure and the structure around that and the family, it just felt like there was more of a concern of that, really. Maybe I've commented more on it a bit later, but there was just a noticing of that scene in episode 1, because it came out quite early in episode 1, where James realised the story's going to break on his affair, and so he had to tell his wife. Next note I've got is, so being the wife of a powerful MP and the world that brings... Now I can't read my writing. I think this is the comment that I was going to talk about, as I just mentioned. Maybe I need to write here to, improve handwriting. Brings his... and the world that brings sort of impacts Sophie and her feelings. As I was saying, it seems like it was more a concern in the foundations and structure of her life, of her husband and family in this powerful political position, and the security of that and everything else, that versus just the raw betrayal of between husband and wife. And it feels like those feelings, her real feelings, were submerged in that chaos of being, in the spotlight of media and everything that goes along that. I've got here, it was like a luxurious container. That's kind of her life at the moment, contained in this political bubble, where everything's very, almost feels safe in that way, where he goes to his Houses of Parliament, bits and bobs every day, and he's in this expensive house and lifestyle, and just continuing on that, another note I've got here was Sophie's reaction more of a hurt to her pride of being a wife that is enough for her husband. So again, it was more just her stance and her place in the family, that her pride being hurt. And move on to the character. I think his character's name's Chris, the political fixer almost. I can't remember his official role to the Prime Minister, but some sort of coordinator, but he seems like he does things behind And maybe I'll get to him a little bit more, but I really didn't. It was a great written character where it's so easy not to like him, and his no compassion, no real. Just felt like there's no real person there really, or he's so disconnected with himself. So maybe he fits in perfectly into that political world of where it's just about getting things done and meaning and things like that are a distant second. I've got the quote here: "Boys will be boys." I think this was from a lunch that James and Sophie went to within somewhere in the house, in one of the political buildings, and if it's a house, part of the Houses of Parliament. But it's a character in there, I can't remember their name, but it's someone kind of a bit higher up talked about that and saying it's just the situation of his affair, because it's just an affair at the moment. It's no accusations of rape. It's just a bit of rain, and it felt a really genuine comment of what happens in that world where so much is at stake, and it is almost a game. You've got their teams of people that there's jostling between that as well, and I'm sure there's competition and things between. And it reminds me of a podcast that interviewed someone within American politics, and they described there's loads of little cliques within it, and it's like almost the school playground. That's how they described it, and I'm sure that mirrors to the politics in the UK. So moving on to a note about Kate, who is a prosecutor, and I've got Kate puts hand over her mouth. The case and evidence against James, this has moved Kate into getting justice, and this is before the reveal of course it was Kate herself who was sexually assaulted by James. But in that moment it was just with her, I think it was like a little bit of a montage of her, the camera going into shots of witness statements, evidence, and then her kind of having a hand over her face, and you can just see that it's a really good scene of her being, you can see without it having to be said that there was more than just a typical case. There was a huge meaning there that at the time I thought originally it was just about Kate getting justice, feeling really moved, and it is that, but of course it's the personal, you can't get more personal than that, right? Try and get justice on behalf of someone and for herself in some ways. And the end of episode 1, there was a visual when the detective stopped James and said, this is now, there's been an accusation of rape, and there's a sense that there was a visual of James like flying backwards, the impact, and I can understand what they tried to do there, but it just didn't seem to chime with that scene really of the news, and it just felt like it was over dramatized, him being, so I didn't really relate to that. I can understand what they were trying to do there, and I think I've written some notes about how like dynamic the show is, especially in the court scenes. I'm sure that will come up as well. Episode 2, as we go on, the challenging to read my notes. So I've got here, loved the banter, the friendly banter between defence and prosecution. And I can't remember what maybe it's in the summary here, what the defence character name is. So there's Kate, and it doesn't say here. It's on the tip of my tongue. But their banter was really good, because it made it feel like it was all about the law and the case. It wasn't personal between them, and I find it can often be depicted that way. There's also, I'm sure sometimes it is. I have no idea of that world really, but it was nice to see a change where there wasn't this icy demeanour between defence and prosecutor. They were kind of colleagues, and they were just doing their jobs. So we've got here the House of Commons scene was difficult to watch. Everything from the arguing to the groans. Yeah, I think this is when they, like the Prime Minister, then the elected person from the other parties, they kind of each get up in turn, speak, and it's just hard to watch because that whole world, it just doesn't make sense to me in some ways. And again, the groans and everything else, it felt like a theatre production, and it's obviously what happens in real life. These kind of groans, it reminds you of just big children in that way, and that was just hard to watch. I found that hard to watch. I've got a note here about a quote from Sophie saying, to rally the troops, and it was like, this was later on in the episode, and I noticed her calm and calculated demeanour in amidst James's panic, panicking about the rape accusation, of things ramping up against him, and it was just really great to say, Sophie's kind of really just that pillar of calmness to say, hey, you need to rally the troops, get yourself together, you need to focus on what's ahead of us. So I found that really, it was kind of a revealing part of Sophie's character there. So I've got, the next note is PM and James is backroom meetup, like it's like a back alley meetup, and echo of truth about the libertines, is that the name? Yeah. So echo of truth about libertines' privileged behaviour and above morality, and extreme scene of their drunken aggression, and what's that word? I can't read. I think it's animalistic. Animalistic behaviour. So it's in there. And there were some flashbacks of scenes when the Prime Minister and James were in that back alley, and he's trying to get his support. Just of that privileged, because you can almost trace back a little bit of of the political people in power now, and the qualities that they have now. You can trace them back to what they had in universities. So in this case, it was a private education, and it can just sense there was just reeking of just privilege and above the law, and that self-centeredness, indulgence, and it just feels like that carries through to them adulthood. And this is what you get today. If you look at the politics in the UK today, people were there. It kind of reflects this, and how they are in university and things, and it kind of it's easy to trace it back to their behaviour and how they were. The next note I've got is Sophie talks to James about her career in literature, and they negotiate and agree that she can pursue and continue a career after the trial. And I got here a genuine warm moment between them, amongst like a spiky one, with Sophie not sure about going to court is a good idea, and that she will be useless there. And so it's kind of in this one scene of conversation at their home. So James and Sophie have that moment where she talks about her career and giving it up, and there's some talk about, well, you chose to do this, and it's and if Sophie was really actually happy doing what she did initially. And then it's kind of a bit of a spiky moment when Sophie mentioned about, is it a good idea for me going to court? And it seemed like she didn't want to really put herself in that world. And then James tells her that it will make him look guilty if she doesn't appear, and he doesn't mention about her support. So it's more just, again, how it looks, which is it seems to take precedent in the political world versus meaning, and like anything that resolves substance and depth. So there was a note about that as well. So that was kind of missing, like not just having his wife's support or loved one's support in a very difficult situation of being in that courtroom, but more so just how it will look or make him look guilty. So a mixed scene with that, and it was nice to see them sort of negotiate and agree about Sophie's career. Like, it didn't go off the rails and turn into an argument. There was some disagreement there initially, and then James said, after the trial, and he kind of gave her that support, which was nice. So there's a interesting camera angle of a scene where Sophie's rowing in her, if it's her canoe, not canoe, well, something related to it. I don't know if it's actually a canoe or if it's another name for it, but her rowing, and it's kind of the camera's going with her rhythm, zooming in and out. I thought that's a really dynamic shot, and it kind of showed a few things with Sophie. It showed her strength and her intensity, both physical and emotionally. So the physical kind of strength it takes to do that, and as the camera is rolling in on her, you can see her resolve. So that was interesting. And so move into the court scenes. Some notes about that. I've got here when Kate summarises the case for the jury and mentioned James's affair. So when she mentioned James's affair, I was kind of looking at her saying, well, you're doing the same thing. So there was that kind of note of similarity in that sense of, as she mentioned the affair, and just thinking about her own situation. I've got a note about Olivia, the so I don't know what I've forgotten the name of what I'd call her. So she wouldn't be the defendant, no. But Olivia, who James, so the rape victim, interesting that the witness stand, so when Olivia kind of got introduced into the show, as the camera kind of gave different angles of the courtroom, you could see it was opposite the upper gallery where you could see Sophie sat. So there was an interesting, you didn't have to look up to see Sophie. So that was interesting. And the court scenes I've got here are dynamic, not stale. It keeps the mind engaged. There's a big note about that, because I could find court scenes can come in big sort of chunks and minutes of narrative and conversation. I find this show did a really good job in mixing up camera angles, different angles of the courtroom, and also movements. There's a shot of the camera gliding across, and again mixed into this was shots of going back into the past or reconstructing the scene of what they were talking about. So I found that really effective, the way those were blended together. So it was great kind of editing, I guess, to make that happen. So the next note I've got is real chemistry between them from their first drink. So this is a note, must be on Olivia and James, and their direct conversation. I think it was when they went to get a drink near the bridge. I felt like you can just sense there was good chemistry. There's chemistry between them, and I felt that was it made it seem real that something could happen between them there. I've got here, you can see the hurt in Olivia's face when James breaks her off. So in that one of those reconstruction shots amidst the court scenes, when they give you the visual of James and Olivia in a room inside the House, inside the, getting a fuse with the House of Commons, House of Parliament, but in their political setting where James's office is, you can see like when he breaks it off of her, you can see her hurt, and I think this is before when she kind of declares that she was in love with him on the stand, but that scene reveals that truth. So that was interesting. And she changes the subject in that reconstruction immediately. Talks about work, so she almost doesn't want his pity. She's going on the defensive of that as well. And I've got here, did Olivia surprise Kate by her love admission, by her saying that she loved him? Because you didn't really see, how Kate prepped Olivia or their interactions, so it was just a big kind of gasp in the court about that. And when that happened, Sophie's reaction is what I kind of expected to happen with when James initially revealed the affair. So it was almost a delayed reaction. And I've got here with her telling the courts and everybody else that she was in love with James, it makes it more real, and it questions his feelings for Olivia. So I'm guessing Sophie's thinking, well, does he feel the same way? And everything just sort of came real for Sophie, and she kind of had that big reaction. So these are notes for episode 3. What happened in episode 3? So that was, so this is when her name Angela, James's barrister Angela, So Angela tears apart Olivia's story. So I've got here effective testimony of rape with visuals of it unfolding. So again, talking about that blending of the narrative and then the reconstructive scenes of what, it's hard to know if that's the truth of what happened or if that's the perspective of one of the characters. I guess in this case, it's depending on who's telling the narrative. Because sometimes I think in a later episode, they re-showed a reconstruction, but from James's point of view. So it's kind of point of view in that respect. But it's a really good way of blending stuff. And I've got here again, angles of cameras and the dynamism and the elements of the court scenes that made that really interesting. This next note is difficult to read. As court as court ends for the day, Sophie and James share a look of is there doubt in Sophie's face? I think James looking up at the gallery, I remember that a few times, and is there like him smiling and wanting maybe some reassurance, but I don't know if there was doubt in Sophie's face in that sense. The defense or the scenes where Angela was kind of tearing Olivia's testimony apart, it's really triggering for me in regards to my mental health, because one of the things I won't go into this too much, I'm sure I'll talk about it in other sort of video logs of my health, but that was just difficult to watch, because it just feels like personally for me that I'm trying to share sort of truths about my health, and it feels like to kind of external organizations, and it's almost feels like you're not believed. You have to prove yourself, and then it sort of echoed that, so that kind of had that effect on me. And that's the end of episode 3. That's all the notes I have for that, really. So episode 4, I'll read some of the summary on this. It's where his accusations kind of extend. So now there's a student in Oxford, kind of another allegation against him. So things are ramping up, and it comes into the reveal that with these kind of flashbacks that Holly, the person who was assaulted in Oxford, is actually Kate. So initially I thought there's a sense that, oh, it's Kate's sister, because I think she calls her mum, I think, to says, something about it. So, and then, you hear that sort of phrase James says about, it's Rizea, don't be such a prick tease, that he's got here, famous phrase. It's kind of said there, and everything kind of clicks into place, and there's that huge sort of twist. Perhaps I won't summarize the other 2 episodes, more just reading through my notes, I guess, which is interesting. But so just kind of general notes about towards the end of the show, about James getting not guilty. I kind of sensed it would be that case, because it's just so difficult to be completely certain with what evidence was presented that he did it, and I just felt like it would take a lot for everyone to agree with sort of no solid evidence in that sense of him doing that. And I've got here, says Sophie still decides to divorce him. So a lot of stuff happened towards the end, really. So it was kind of the big build up to the verdict, and suddenly it was the fallout of the marriage. And then, of course, the story of how James helped the Prime Minister, the truth of that comes out more and more. So it's like, I think it's a scene, I think, where James and Sophie were, but it's just more lies come out from him, and the real truth comes out. And then Sophie realises she's in the middle of that whole situation of one of their university students jumping off a building, and the whole issue of him hiding his drugs, and I found that was quite, I don't know, it just felt like a lot was kind of squeezed in at the end. Perhaps it was a 6-episode miniseries, so but in regards to the storyline, it was nice to see Sophie kind of coming forward despite that sort of really stable sort of family structure within a political sort of bubble, because it's almost like a bit of an institution, and sort of protection there, but she kind of stepped out of that, not wanting, for her own sort of personal, of doing the right thing, and also not believing James as well, that even though he's not guilty of what he did, and then the reveal of the scene of Kate and Sophie talking, and her revealing, having their first kind of honest conversation, really, about, so in a sense Holly and Sophie talking, and telling Kate that that she's called the press to give them the story of James and Tom, and the drugs at that party, and the death of one of their students. So all kind of, I think she said something like, we haven't got him, he didn't go down for that, but he will go down for this. So just an overview on the characters. I didn't really connect with many characters, really. It was just, I think it lacked, for me, it just sort of, maybe it was just one of those shows that that was more about the plot and on that side of things. I didn't really, there wasn't a characters that have stayed with me with that, really. Closest character may have been possibly Kate, but I just felt like it was more of a plot driven sort of series, and it makes sense, I guess, with this type of storyline. It's going to be fast moving, and it's 6 episodes, so it's probably hard to get real in depth if there were several seasons of stuff, and eventually it gives time to reveal layers of the character, and for that to deepen. So yeah, just yeah. So, but I must say it was nice, sort of writing notes and watching it and enjoying the camera stuff. I found that quite good. Just maybe the craft of certain, how the certain shots and the court scenes and the dynamic, sort of, that was quite nice to witness. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Anatomy of a Scandal.